I have just a couple questions. I'm going to want to do an informal survey before I get started, and I would just like to see a show of hands of how many of you do not have access to email. Do not get email. Okay? Well, next week we're giving out free iPads. No. So we're going to take another offering for those iPads. No. Well, that's good to know. That makes it even more important when you do a Get Connecting card that you give us your current address. Because obviously we just can't send out an email to everybody because there's a number of you that won't get the email. And so please, I'm sending out a letter this coming week. And if you want to get that letter, make sure we have your current address. Now, if we already have your address, and if you got my letter last month, you don't need to refill that thing every week. But if there's been a change, please let us know, and you'll get an exciting letter this week. And I'm not going to tell you what's in it. So you'll have to just get that letter or show up next week, and we'll talk about that letter just a little bit. So I really do appreciate that, and it just helps us to keep connected. I don't care if you're at a church, in your marriage, in a friendship. Probably one of the number one reasons things break down when something hits the fan, it's because of lack of communication. So let it help us by giving us your correct contact information, and we'll do our best to keep communication flowing around here. Let me pray with you. Again, Lord, for your presence in this place, I give you thanks. For the people that probably had some struggles to get here, or maybe even some arguments along the way, I pray that you will bring their spirits in line with you, that they will realize that your shoulders are big enough to carry their burdens, and may the thoughts of each of their hearts and the words that I share this morning be acceptable in your sight, because you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, when Mackenzie, and again, she is now my 19, almost 20-year-old daughter, when she moves, she's going to move here in about a month. So when she moves here, I probably can't tell you all these stories about her. But until then, get ready, because you're going to get a boatload of them. But when she was 5, we were shopping for a new bed for her. She was growing out of her crib. She was a very compliant young girl. She is a young woman, too, and she's very compliant as well. But so we're out there shopping, and we're at one of those stores that has the rooms all set up. And so she goes to a place where there's a bed and there's a dresser, and she says, I want a bed, a desk, and a pewter, meaning a computer. And I'm thinking, what have we done to this little girl? And then when she was about a year older than that, some friend of mine wanted to give me a Palm Pilot, one of those little electronic things that in the olden days, kept your addresses and your schedules. And so I remember going home and saying to my wife, hey, so-and-so's going to give me a Palm Pilot. Isn't that great how the Lord met our need? And, guys, you've had that look. And she rolls her eyes and sure, sure it's a need, Juno. But then when I said, but this guy also knows how hectic our lives are, and he's giving you one as well. Well, then it was a different story. She was thrilled how God met our needs with these little electronic calculators, not schedule keepers. Next day I bring them home. They're not even out of the box. And Mackenzie runs to her timeout corner, which was, again, she was very a good little girl. She runs her timeout corner and starts to cry and say, I want one, because I would not have missed a meeting I would not have missed a meeting in class today if I had that. And I'm going, what are you talking about? And again, what have we created? She's just a reflection of what she was hearing and seeing at home. And finally, this was a few months after the Palm Pilot incident. We're shopping, and Mackenzie loves stuffed animals. And I am sure we are about to move 2 suitcases full of stuffed animals from Arizona to California. We've given enough away. I can't, talk about being a blessing to other kids who don't have any. Let's give these away. They're coming with us. But she said there was this. It was a $25 stuffed animal, and we said no, we're not going to buy it. We had some backbone back then, and she just cried, and she said this. She says, "I was created to have that dog." So we are all in trouble. Just again, what have we created? What have we, whether it was Mackenzie or as a society, and that's where I'm going this morning, is to what have we created in our society that may be good or bad. It doesn't have to necessarily be evil, but just what's going on around us that we have contributed to or are a part of one way or another. So I want to begin with the family. What about our families? And again, I'm an example that, in the olden days, and I'll talk about my olden days, we'd always go to my grandma's house for dinner on a Sunday or on the weekend. All the cousins, and we'd all go there. Or we go to I lived south of Detroit, Michigan, and we go up to my other grandma's house on about once a month, and she was Armenian, and she always had this weird food that we wouldn't have at my other grandma's house. But that's just what we did. We're always together. In Michigan, we would drive, once Bonnie and I had Mackenzie, we would take a trip about 50 minutes or so to my folks' house, my dad and his wife's house, probably 3 Sundays out of the month. And she'd make us a roast beef dinner with mashed potatoes, and we'd play cards with them. That was just a part of what we did. But now, there are families that, husbands and wives, for whatever reason, they work most of the week apart. Seldom can you get the whole family together to have a dinner. I'm living here, Mackenzie's in Arizona. When I moved to Arizona, I was in Arizona, Bonnie and Mackenzie were back in Michigan for 2 months. And so I'm not saying those are evil. Sometimes it's just the necessity of life where you find yourself. But again, no longer is the family the core, the center of everything. And now yesterday I did a memorial service for Dale Lindley. He was 86. And he really had lived out the value of living out his faith at home. Because all of his kids, they just get together, they got together. He was so proud in the olden days here, 20 of his family members would be here on Christmas morning. I just found out, we used to do a Christmas morning breakfast? Yeah, I'm thinking that ain't going to happen this Christmas, so I'd share that with you. But 25 of his family were here. And his family was critically important to his mission in life. But again, I wonder, is it as important as maybe it should be at times? And then what about our neighborhoods? We all live in our own routines. My HOA in Arizona says if I'm not in my front yard, I cannot have my garage door open. And many of you are there where you open the garage, you go in, and at least in Arizona, we go in the backyard and go in the pool. And, there were a few weeks in the month of, what would that be, maybe February or March, when it felt like you can go outside and not burn in the depths of hell from the heat. That, neighbors would actually surface and do some yard work, and we'd talk. But nowadays, even when I was going to graduating from seminary, going off to interview for churches, we lived in an apartment. It was trash day on a Monday, but I was out of town, so I went downstairs, knocked on our neighbor's door, didn't know their names, found out they had a baby, didn't know they had a baby. It's just like we get in our own little worlds that we don't even know our neighbors. And even now, I have to be intentional to go home, and we have a new neighbor. Well, we had a new neighbor when I used to live in Arizona. They moved in the month before I moved here. And so I'd go back home and write their names down so I could remember their names and call them by name versus just like wave and hey, and like, I have no idea who that guy is. But our neighborhoods aren't what they used to be. And again, I'm not saying that's evil, that's ungodly. It's just reality. It's what we've created. And our careers. Long gone are the days that you start the job, your first job out of college or your first job out of high school, and you graduate from that job. And not graduate, you retire. Those days are gone. Most people are going to switch jobs 2 and 3 times. I'm on my 6th career move with, Lord willing, my last here at New Life. My dad retired from the DT&I Railroad, Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton or something like that. He started there, and he ended his career there. And till weeks before he passed away, he'd be talking about the guys at the yard and talking about what's going on with them and what they're doing. And really, that was his place of community. He wasn't a real big churchgoer, but his job created community. And if we were honest, for most of us, give us a better pension plan, some medical insurance, or who knows if that's even a value now, who knows. But, give us a bigger salary, some more vacation, make those benefits the right things, and you're going to jump ship. And that's not evil. That's not bad. I'm just saying that's what our reality is, and seldom is community even found in our workplaces anymore. And then what about the church? We used to, we still have those Christmas snow village things, those ceramic little houses that they light up and you put them out at Christmas time. And my wife would go shopping, and then Mackenzie and I would bring out boxes of these things. And we'd create this little village I'd bring out a big piece of plywood, and we'd just create this huge thing. And my wife would come home, and she's like, how can you get that done? She goes, I'm with her all day. I can't get anything done. I leave for 2 hours, and you've decorated the whole dining room with this whole new village. And my daughter used to say, Dad, where do we put things? And I would say, well, let's put the church. I was a pastor then. Let's put the church in the center of it all. And because the church in the olden days, so to speak, the church often was the center of the town. It's where meetings happened. It's where schools occurred. I mean, the church was the hub of activity. In fact, that's some of our vision now, to return to that with New Life for the City, is to create this place where people come and use our facility and just become a little bit more comfortable in the doors of this place. But for most of us, and at times, many of us here, church becomes a thing to do on our Outlook calendar. Church becomes something to check off. I've done it for the week. Our faith is confined to a 1-hour time slot on a Sunday. No longer is it a reflection of our life in Christ, but more of something we do. And I think in all of those things, we're losing the sense of community. You've heard it said before several times that, well, maybe you've heard it. I've heard it several times, that a bar is probably more friendly than a church. And for some of you who've seen this classic TV show, I think you'll remember some of these scenes.
Afternoon, everybody.
No!
Afternoon, everybody.
Hey,
Norm! Afternoon, everybody.
Hey, Norm!
Afternoon, everybody.
Norman?
Everybody knows Norm's name. Now, I'm not saying let's go out to the bar tonight and everyone will know our name. But if we served wine for communion, maybe we'd have more people once. No. I'm not saying that either. But anyway, I think that's normal for us. We want to feel like Norm most of the time when we go to places. That sense of community, that sense of wanting to be connected. And so I just think we are on a crash course for isolation in our society. That we can get it all wrapped up ourselves And I would like to present, again, another perspective. I talked about it a month and a half ago, the need for community, a biblical perspective, why we need to be intentional to do everything we can not to live lives of isolation. I'm going to take us back again to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, when God said, "Let us make man in our image." Folks, that's the plural. Some would say it's referring to the Trinity. So back in the creation of the world, God is saying, let us make man in our image. We've been never designed to live lives of isolation. And I think that's important for us to remember, even especially during the holidays. I know we sing Emmanuel, Emmanuel, and we use all kinds of words like the incarnation. You know, that's God's way of having us not live in isolation. You know, God with us. God taking the form of man in the incarnation. God desiring us to be in relationship. And the ultimate relationship is obviously with him through Jesus. But he also calls each of us to be in community and to be in relationship. And again, folks, I know that is very much easier said than done. And I'd like to go to the classic passage found in Acts. It's found in Acts chapter 2, verses 41 to 47. It said, "So those who welcomed his message were baptized, and that day about 3,000 persons were added. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. All came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved." I think this verse tells us some truths about the church. And I'm going to use the illustration of a bird. That I think the church is a bird that has two wings. And one wing is when we meet together corporately like this. And some wonderful things happen. And even though I may like to sing loud in my truck to a CD, there is a difference, folks, when we can sing like we did today collectively. Now, there were some lights on the organ, and I hope that wasn't teasing you thinking the organ was going to play today. It's still under repair. 2,100 pipes need to be lifted, tested, cleaned, and all kinds of stuff. So we're not ready for that yet. But there is a difference when we really raise the roof here at the church, when we worship together, when we can meet together. And some of those things just don't happen in a smaller group. So one wing of the bird is large group, and the other wing that we read about in Acts is being together in community. And I think if you go one or the other, that bird's going to go in circles. Now we have one of those pest strips in the garage, and there's been more than one bird that has landed on that pest strip, and one of his wings get caught, and so poor Mackenzie notices this little bird flapping in the garage, going around in circles because one wing isn't working. And so I think as a church, if we're just leaning on one of those wings, we're not in balance. A sign of success isn't to have a parking lot full of cars all the time. Even though that's a sign that people are coming into the church. But as I met with a gentleman this week, he said, I need more than what happens on a Sunday. So while I can sing, Juno, and be together with people, I need more conversation. I need more of a spiritual community. And so that's what comes in your growth groups and the On the Grow groups, Sunday school classes. Those of you who are meeting even in groups that you don't track with the church, You are in places of community because you realize that God didn't wire you to live lives of isolation. And so I think at times, and especially with the new pastor, lead pastor, you're thinking, oh, we're doing great. Let's just keep this up. And in reality, if we're not intentional about the other wing, pretty soon we're just going to be spinning circles around ourselves. And I know from the people I've met already here, we don't want to be just focused on ourselves. No doubt we want to be a people of faith that can come together, love each other, hear the word, be inspired to take a step to get to know our neighbor so that ideally relationships happen. And ideally you can invite your friends here to a place where they could hear some of the life-changing stories of the gospel. In fact, that's what we talk about in the classic verse. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you, and remember that I am with you always to the end of the age. Again, all of discipleship is not going to happen, folks, by just the large group experience. But we need to be intentional as the church to exercise and to equip people so that community can happen in other places besides just here on a Sunday. And again, I know that it is easier said than done. It's obvious that I think for most of us at times when we do feel lonely, we feel by ourselves and alone, and some that's a natural feeling. And that's okay. It's a reminder that God hasn't wired us to live lives of isolation. Now, being alone isn't, and if you're an introvert at times, you need to be alone to refuel your batteries, to recharge your batteries, and that is wonderful. But God still calls us to interact with others so that we can, as we just read in Matthew, make disciples of all nations. So that, as you then read in Acts earlier, so that really hundreds of people will come to the faith and that their lives will be changed. We know that we love because He first loved us. And even though I like using the internet and I like sending emails, folks, relationships and love doesn't happen unless you're with people. And again, while for some of us, being in the large group is a very safe place, and I want to honor that. For some of you, depending on your relationships, you've been burned. Depending on your church, you've been burned. Depending on work, you've been burned. And so just to come in here and sit and reflect, process some things, that's good. But I think ultimately, we've got to be involved with other people. Jesus had 12 disciples. Some of them were closer to Him than the others. But He was intentional to build those relationships with Him. And I think it is one of the great, like I did the funeral yesterday, and I think we just take it for granted that we'll be around as long as Dale was, 86 years. I mean, that's a long time. And some of you don't need to raise your hands, are pretty close to that, or maybe a little bit over. They were married for 65 years. What a blessing. Something that we often take for granted. But I think we just need to be intentional to be in relationships. But I think at times we're afraid to. I think at times it's easier to wear a mask. I think at times we feel it's safer to wear a mask because then people don't need to know my hurts. They don't need to know my pain. They don't need to know the things I'm struggling with. So I wear a mask. 30-some years ago, a man, Charles Finn, wrote a poem about masks that we're going to hear right now. Ralph, come up and share that with us.
Please hear what I am not saying. Don't be fooled by me. Don't be fooled by the face I wear, for I wear a mask. I wear 1,000 masks, masks that I'm afraid to take off, and none of them are me. Pretending is an art that's second nature with me. But don't be fooled, for God's sake, don't be fooled. I give you the impression that I'm secure, that all is sunny and unruffled with me, within as well as without, that confidence is my name and coolness is my game, that the water's calm and I'm in command, and that I need no one. But don't believe me, please. My surface may be smooth, but my surface is my mask, my ever-varying and ever-concealing mask. Beneath lies no smugness, no complacence. Beneath dwells the real me in confusion, in fear, in aloneness. But I hide this. I don't want anybody to know it. I panic at the thought of my weaknesses and fear exposing them. That's why I frantically create my masks to hide behind. They're nonchalant, sophisticated facades to help me pretend, to shield me from the glance that knows. But such a glance is precisely my salvation. And I know it. That is, if it's followed by acceptance, if it's followed by love. It's the only thing that can liberate me from myself, from my walls, self-built prison walls, from the barriers that I so painstakingly erect. That glance is the only thing that assures me of what I can't assure myself, that I'm really worth something. But I don't tell you this. I don't dare. I'm afraid to. I'm afraid you'll think less of me, that you'll laugh, and your laugh would kill me. I'm afraid that deep down I'm nothing, that I'm just no good, and you would see this and reject me. So I play my game, my desperate pretending game, with a facade of assurance without and a trembling child within. So begins the parade of masks, the glittering but empty parade of masks, and my life becomes a front. I idly chatter to you in suave tones of surface talk. I tell you everything that's nothing, and nothing of what's everything, of what's crying within me. So when I'm going through my routine, do not be fooled by what I'm saying. Please listen carefully and try to hear what I am not saying. Hear what I'd like to say, but what I cannot say. I dislike hiding. I dislike the superficial game I'm playing, the superficial, phony game. I'd really like to be genuine and spontaneous and me. But I need your help, your hand to hold, even though my masks would tell you otherwise. It would not be easy for you. Long-felt inadequacies make my defenses strong. The nearer you approach me, the blinder I may strike back. Despite what books say of men, I am irrational. I fight against the very thing I cry out for. You wonder who I am? You shouldn't, for I am every man and every woman who wears a mask. Don't be fooled by me, at least not by the face I wear.
At times, we need to wear a mask. At times, we need some emotional intelligence, just not to always say what we're thinking. But in the context of the poem just shared with us, most of us wear the mask because we're afraid to take another step, that we really are afraid of rejection. So I'm going to give you a handle on what to do in the sense of removing the mask, and that's going to come from Ecclesiastes. And though one might prevail against the other, two will withstand one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And what I'm saying to you today is that threefold cord is your safety net. Is your way to take down that mask just a little bit. And I'm going to give you some questions to help us, to help you get a handle on that. The first one's going to be to build a threefold cord. I'm talking about, one, you see in the illustration with the cord, a thin cord will rip easily. You wrap it with three and you just can't break it. And that's like our lives. And so to get a handle on how do we put together that three cord, one is, do you have an older person who is building into your life? So as one of your cords of your life, do you have somebody that is an older person that is building into you? That means you need to be intentional about that. Some of you are probably thinking of a word, a mentor, a coach. Let me clarify, too, that a mentor doesn't mean somebody's smarter than you in everything that you say and do. It doesn't mean they have their life all together, but it means that they're going to be able to love you, accept you as you pull the mask down. So one way to break the issue of isolation or to stop the train from taking us into a world where we just live by ourselves alone in our secure homes, we need to be in community. And one way to do that, I'm asking the question, do you have somebody older that you go to? Another question is, do you have a soul brother or sister? Somebody who's older, somebody who is on the same level. Somebody you can call at 3 a.m. And again, I've been blessed with these folks in my life. When at my first church, there were some very mean people. 2 pastors left before I did, 2 left after I did, because of the same group of people. And so I had a friend who would ask me, how am I doing with that, and how is that affecting my marriage? And it was that same friend that, as my wife was going through the cancer, he was saying, how is Juno doing? When we knew we were dealing with all this organic, naturopathic stuff that wasn't covered by insurance, he's like, how are you staying afloat financially? He could ask the questions. I'm thinking, I don't know what else to do. He was the guy I could go to. He was my soul brother. He was my go-to guy. And I'm convinced, as I've met with many people throughout my 20 years in official ministry, that there are so many of us, so many of you, that you are missing the blessing of a soul brother or sister. It's almost like saving up for a 401k. It's easier said than done. And when the stuff of life hits the fan, that's not going to be the time to say, I have nobody to talk to. You need to be investing in some of those relationships sooner than later to help build that safety net for you so that your spirit won't be broken. And the best way to do some of these is, again, by you taking the initiative to do it for somebody else. So back to the first question. Do you have somebody who's older? Don't be thinking, who can I go to here in the church? But who is younger than me that I could pour into? And rather than thinking, nobody here wants to be my friend, I am just a loser, nobody likes me, why don't you be thinking, well, who can I be a friend to? And then finally, is there somebody younger than you that you are building into? So who are you influencing? A younger little kid, so to speak, little kid. First one is, who is pouring into you? Second one is, who are you relating to this way? And the third one is, who are you giving to? You notice there, it's not all about you receiving. And that's an easy easy place to settle in. It's all about me. And I think as you find somebody to pour into, that you take that step. As you take the step to saying, okay, Lord, obviously, Lord, I know you haven't called me to live in life of isolation. I know you want me to be in relationship, but I don't know who to hang out with. You need to talk to God about those things. And you'd be amazed at what doors start to open just to hang out with people, where you can be yourself and take that mask down a little bit. Because every failure, I don't care if it's a pastoral failure probably, political, corporate, relational in your neighborhoods, when somebody goes down the toilet, so to speak, it's probably because they didn't have a cord of 3 in their life to hold them together. They didn't have somebody to say, you know what, I'm sending, and these are conversations I've had in my office, not here yet, I've only been here a month. Well, it started with some inappropriate text. And one thing led to another. And I said, you've been here for 7 years. You weren't with a group of guys that you could say, hey guys, is this good or bad? Because they'd all would wring your neck and say it's bad. But because you live in, you just come to the church and you leave, you didn't have anybody to bounce these things off of. And if they were bad, they're still going to love you, but they're going to guide you and say, yeah, you may want to think about that. Whether it's simple things on raising a kid, parenting, relationships, business things, it all goes so much better when there's that cord of 3. And I believe that's our safety net. I think we all need that as we think of new life for the city. Because Lord willing, all of us will continue to do things that's going to open up our doors to the community. That's going to cause people to take another look at what is this thing called the faith. And I think we all need to be grounded to the core as we extend beyond these doors. And the best way to do that, I have found, is by making sure I have a cord of 3. That I just don't, even as a pastor. My wife used to say, you can't get close to people. She grew up in a different tradition than me. The pastor has to live, you really need to create safe walls between you and the congregation. She goes, you just can't always hang out with the congregation. And I'm saying, well, these are my people. These are who God has called me to lead. And I'm willing to take that risk. But I need to be in community, not because, and you need to be in community, not because I say so, because I believe that is how God has wired us individually from the beginning of time. And I believe as we are an effective church with the 2 wings, corporate things, which we need, folks, it just builds momentum and it encourages us that as we come together in the large groups, that our faith grows deeper, our impact in the community goes deeper as we are in smaller groups. And depending on your season in life, you may hang out here a little bit more, you may hang out here a little bit more. But as the church grows to be the hope of the world, as New Life grows to be the hope of Artesia and Cerritos and Bellflower, we'll do so, and we'll make an impact that God's going to use us, and He's going to change your neighbor's life. He's going to restore your marriage. He's going to give you hope for the future. And all that happens, I think, as we exercise what it is to be a healthy church, and that's going to happen as we're a cord of 3. Let me pray. Lord, I know you came to earth because you loved us. You left glory for us. And I know we take that for granted. And I'm convinced by the people I've already met here, Lord, that they know you want them to make a difference and you want them to be in community. So help us all. Help us to be intentional, to be praying for people that we can pour into. for people that we can be a soul brother or sister or a friend to, and people that we can influence. May we not be so proud that we can't listen to others for wisdom. May we be not so proud that we think we have nothing to offer to somebody else. May we not be so proud that we can extend words of wisdom to somebody younger. And as we do that, Lord, your individual people here will be strengthened. Our church will not be the same, and that will be all for your glory for eternity. Amen.